every breath loosen one knot: brows, jaw, shoulders, hands. Whatever you carried today can rest on the floor beside the bed. You don't need it where we're going. Picture a warm night laid over snow like a shawl. The moon is round and kind. A young woman, Lumi, cups a small white bell that glows as softly as a candle kept for good news. Nothing hurries here. Thoughts that try to speak are thanked and given a seat by the door. In the distance, a willow keeps watch. In the grove, roots test a gentle stretch. On the ridge, a nest remembers the shape of air. You feel the valley match your breathing 2 counts in, 3 counts out, and with each exhale, the world becomes simpler. A flower, a hand, a path, and a promise that waking can be tender. Let the room dim behind your eyelids. Let the night carry you. Under the pale shawl of late winter, the valley lies curled like a cat on a warm hearth. Hills fold into one another in soft, round shapes, as if the land itself has learned the art of blankets. Birch trunks stand like careful brushstrokes against the low sky, and the lake at the center is a glassy saucer, holding a reflection of dawn not yet poured. The air carries the faintest smell of pine and wood smoke, and somewhere far off a door closes the way a page turns quiet, certain, kind. Beneath the lake's thin skin of ice, the water is dreaming. It remembers the summer's swift stories, the quicksilver laughter of trout, the cheer of rain. Now it keeps its voice tucked close, a murmur held in cupped hands. The stream that will one day braid the valley with song lies still in its bed, like a child fallen asleep mid-sentence. The trees, tall and patient, rest their sap in the roots, sending up only slow messages that taste like honey and thyme. Here and there, the roofs of small cottages lift their heads from the snow, black chimneys wearing the last threads of evening smoke. Inside, beds are warm, kettles think soft thoughts, and clocks feel no urgency at all. A quilt waits on a chair. A book leans against a candle, content to be unread. The whole valley keeps a single rhythm. Inhale, exhale, as if the land itself could breathe you calmer. On the high rise to the east, the first suggestion of morning gathers, not bright, not bold, but tender like a promise whispered in a sleeve. This is the moment the valley loves, the seam between night and day, winter and spring, sleeping and waking. The light does not land all at once. It moves like a kindness across the ridges, stroking the frost, sipping the shadows, finding the gentlest path into every hollow. Even the crows on the far fence post seem to know it is time to be quiet just a little longer. Listen closely. Somewhere under a crust of ice sugar and the hush of old snow, something small is ready, not in a rush, not pushing. Simply ready the way a heart is ready to forgive. The ground holds its breath. The roots hold their breath. Even the wind, which has so many pockets and moods, sets down its rattles and waits. This is when a bell that is not a bell begins to ring. It is not the clang of a tower or the jingle of a shop door. It is finer than silver, softer than wool against the cheek. It rings the way light rings when it first finds your eyelids in the morning. It rings the way your name sounds when spoken by someone who loves you. A single, small note, clear and almost shy, threads itself through the stillness and lingers, as if to say, I am here, I am beginning. Under a veil of frost, near the old stone where foxes pass, a bud leans into the buried light. It has waited through long nights and slow snowfalls, tucked tight like a secret in a mitten. Now, touched by the farewells of winter and the earliest breath of spring, it loosens one white edge. The frost beholds it and does not resist. Even frost understands that beginnings are part of its work. The bell note travels across the lake's smooth face, brushes the birches, and tiptoes into a hollow where a little spirit sleeps. She is made of the season's gentleness, a moth's wing, the glimmer of ice, the hush of midnight snowfall. Her name is Lumi, and her job, if such things can be called jobs, is to watch over the last quiet of winter, smoothing it, stitching it, and keeping it from tearing in the hands of hurry. She sleeps curled inside a cup of snow, a white hood around her hair, a shawl of soft dusk across her shoulders. The bell finds her the way a thought finds a dream, and she stirs. Lumi's eyelids flutter once, twice, and open with the slow brightness of a candle being coaxed to life. She listens without moving. Spirits understand that listening is a kind of warmth. The bell sounds again, one little echo of light against light, and she feels it in her ribs the way one feels a gentle knock on a familiar door. Soon, Lumi breathes, and her voice is fog-soft. It is not a promise or a command, only a kindness tucked into a word. Her hands mittened in light rest on the snow. She does not rush to stand. She remembers the valley's own lesson. Waking is gentle. The third bell note arrives like a smile. Lumi sits, brushes a petal of ice from her cheek, and looks across the valley. Everything is as she left it. The lake still, the trees composed, the cottages drowsy, the hilltops wearing the night's last calm. And yet, because of that small sound, nothing is exactly the same. Lumi can feel it, a subtle loosening, a softening at the edge of things, a seam unpicked by patience. She rises, and the snow does not crunch under her. It hushes, then reshapes itself, as though pleased to be stepped on by someone so soft. The air recognizes her and slips about her shoulders like a scarf. Lumi walks toward the old stone, toward the place where snow folds into a pocket of shelter. Her feet leave oval impressions that warm very slightly at the edges, not melting, simply remembering the shape of spring. As she walks, she speaks to the valley in the language of breath and pulse. "You have slept well," she says. "You have kept your promises to the roots and the seeds, to the dens and the feathered nests. You have stored away the silence for those who need it. Now we will learn a new quiet together, the quiet of beginning." The bell sounds again, closer now, and Lumi finds the source. There, beneath a clear lace of frost, the bud shows itself a small lantern of white, cupped in green hands. It leans as if listening, Lumi kneels. The frost around the bud is a map of delicate rivers, and in each river a thread of light runs, thin as a hair, bright as a sigh. She does not touch it yet. Spine straight, eyes soft, she simply listens with it. The valley listens too. Down in the cottages, a kettle gives a single polite hiss and settles. In a hollow trunk, a sleeping bird adjusts one feather and slips back into its soft, safe dark. A fox at the tree line lifts its nose, reads the news in the air. Change is coming, but not the kind that snaps, the kind that lifts and curls its tail tighter, reassured. The ice on the lake whispers a word only Lumi can hear. It sounds like ready. At last, Lumi leans closer. Snowdrop, she says, giving the bud its true name, the way you might return a lost scarf, folded and warm. The bud trembles. The frost swallows light and gives it back, brighter. The first bell note becomes 2, then 3, each one no louder than a heartbeat under a blanket. The white at the tip unfolds a fraction, then rests, then unfolds again. No haste, no pushing, just the simple courage of opening. Lumi smiles the way dawn smiles when it notices a window has been left slightly ajar. There you are, she whispers. I have kept the valley sleeping for you. It will wake when you say so. The bud seems to understand. The bell note lengthens neither command nor plea, simply invitation. Across the valley, the light at the eastern seam inches forward, peach and pearl stitched into the gray. The birches accept a little color along their white arms. The lake, proud and calm, allows the idea of a ripple to visit its edge. The hills, dignified with snow, feel the soft weight shift in their folds as if a sleeper turned toward morning. Lumi cups her hands near the bud, palms not touching, and gives it the shelter of her warmth. When you are ready, she says, when you are ready, we will wake the water, the root, and the wing. We will do it the way a good story begins quietly, with care. The snowdrop inclines, and the bell answers. The note lingers in the valley's ear, then fades to a lovely silence. Lumi breathes out, and the breath leaves her like a small white cloud, friendly and unafraid. She looks across the sleeping valley once more. The roofs, the trees, the lake, the slow sky, and nods as if agreeing with a wise old friend. Rest a little longer, she tells the hills. I will watch the light. And so the first light gathers at the edge of the world. The snowdrop holds one more moment of gentle bravery, and the valley, cradled by its own peace, dozes on the safe side of morning, ready to be awakened by the smallest bell. Lumi knelt beside the bud, cradled in frost lace, her mittened hands making a shelter of warmth without touching. The valley's hush leaned closer, curious and patient. A thin glow gathered along the green sheath, a glow with the color of milk in moonlight, and the white tip loosened as if it had exhaled a long, long breath. Something more than light stirred something like a memory returning to its rightful room. Little bell, Lumi whispered, giving the bud a second name, the name of what it would become. Are you ready to speak? The bud did not answer in words. It answered the way a heart answers when it is seen. A faint note rose, finer than silver thread, soft as wool against the cheek. It rang once, then rested, as if to measure the space around its own sound. Lumi felt it pass through her, tapping gently at old doors, reminding bones and breath that beginnings prefer quiet. She smiled, and the frost smiled back by loosening its grip grain by glittering grain. The tip unfolded a sliver, then paused, unfolded again, then paused longer, like a careful story choosing the right pace. With each small motion, the note returned one bell, then two, woven into the hush like a soft hem. Lumi saw the petals find their shape, white bells with edges as thin as kindness, a green mark at the throat like the signature of spring. When the bloom settled open, its little head nodded, as if shy to have become itself. Across the lake, a ripple thought about being born, and reassured by the gentleness, decided to wait. In the tree line, a fox yawned without teeth, eyes blinking slow thanks. Inside a cottage, a kettle lifted its lid, the smallest touch hello, then set it down again. The valley's sleep did not shatter. It shifted, the way a resting child turns a pillow to the cool side. Lumi listened to the bell's steadying note until the edges of the air felt smooth beneath her palms. Then, in the language of spirits, which is mostly listening wrapped in kindness, she asked, "What do you need me to know?" The bell brightened, and a hush like gathered pages turned in the soil. Not speech, not a command, more like a memory being offered. Lumi closed her eyes to see better. She saw the valley as it had lived through many winters and many thaws, each spring arriving with its own softness. She saw a bloom like this one appearing once, when the birches were thin and brave, once when the lake was still learning to hold the sky, once when cottages were only thoughts in the wood's imagination. Every time, a snowdrop rang at first light, and the valley woke without hurry, as if the bell had taught time to breathe. A phrase glided through her like a feather. Snowdrop bells appear once each century to ask winter to loosen its hands, not to scold it, not to banish it, but to invite it to rest so that spring can try its careful steps. Lumi opened her eyes, and the bell's glow settled into a steady, gentle brightness. She knew her work as surely as a stream knows downhill. During the long months, she had stitched quiet into the seams of the hills, combed sleep into the pines, folded blankets of snow where the roots asked for extra silence. She had promised the last cold that she would not let rush or clamor bruise the tender. And yet, here was the snowdrop, the very sign she had waited for, the soft knock at winter's door. "Little bell," Lumi said, and her voice was a warm pocket in the thin air. "I have guarded the stillness for you. I will help you wake the valley slowly, like opening a book one page at a time." The bell rang again, a silvery yes, and a pale thread of light extended from its throat, the way a path draws itself across a map. It did not point with urgency. It shimmered in 3 directions, faint and sure, toward the lake where water remembered song, toward the grove where roots dreamed of sap, and toward the ridge where feathers kept faithful watch under lace. Water, root, wing, Lumi murmured, as if reading a recipe written by dawn. We will go there when the valley is ready to be asked. She looked to the east. The seam of morning had brightened by the thin width of a sigh. The birches blushed a timid pearl. Snow listened with a softer ear, but a caution rose like a small hand at Lumi's shoulder, gentle, necessary. She remembered the solemn vow she shared with late winter. Do not tug the world awake, let it lean into waking. For a time she did nothing but breathe with the valley. Inhale, and the lake accepted the idea of movement. Exhale, and the cottages turned in their sleep without waking. In that soft rhythm, the bell laid down a second thread, this one a loop that circled back to Lumi's hands. It hovered there like a ribbon waiting to be tied, bright as promise, light as mercy. Is this for me? She asked. The bell's glow answered by deepening, a calm pulse that matched Lumi's heart. She held her palms nearer, not touching, and felt warmth gather between her fingers like a cupped candle. The snowdrop seemed to study her, to weigh her promises against the valley's need. Spirits do not force, they are invited. Lumi waited, trusting patience the way one trusts a path well walked before. At last, the loop of light lowered and settled into her mittens with no weight at all, only presence. Lumi curled her fingers slightly, and the warmth gathered like tea in a cup. The snowdrop's stem bowed in relief rather than regret, as if lending a piece of itself to a friend for safekeeping. The bell tone sounded once more clear, sweet, undemanding, and the bloom glowed on, rooted, content. I will carry your ringing, Lumi promised, only as far as kindness reaches, only as softly as first light. She did not pluck the flower. She would never. Instead, the loop of bell light rested in her hands like a traveling echo, a way for the bloom to be in two places at once, the root keeping faith with the earth, the sound exploring the valley's sleeping rooms. Lumi lifted her hands and felt the note settle in her palms, a hush that made everything around her kinder. The frost at her knees laughed in tiny lights and loosened into a sparkle of powder. Where Lumi's feet had been, two oval impressions melted just enough to look like the idea of spring, a memory of warmth more than a change of season. Carefully, with the reverence one gives a letter from a loved one, she cupped the bell light close to her chest. The valley's breath matched her breath. The lake, sensing its name, had been spoken kindly, held still but hopeful. The birches straightened by the breath of a sigh. A bird woke, not to sing, but to know that singing would return. Before I go to water, to root, and to wing, Lumi said softly, I must choose the pace. The bell teaches me, ring, then rest, warm, then listen, ask, then wait. She stood, and the snow took her rising as a compliment, reshaping itself politely. Around the living bloom, the frost spun a scant halo, protective but not possessive, like the last line of a lullaby. Lumi placed the bell light a second, traveling self of the flower into her pocket of dusk-colored shawl. It did not dim there. It glowed through the cloth like morning through linen, a small lantern to the left of her heartbeat. "Thank you," she told the snowdrop. "Keep your roots steady. I will be your footsteps." The flower inclined once more. Lumi turned toward the lake, the first of the 3 quiet places, and began to walk in the measured way the bell had shown her. 2 slow steps, then a pause to listen. 2 slow breaths, then a pause to feel the valley answering back. With each step, the frost rethreaded itself behind her. No footprints at all, only ovals of softened memory. Each one a tiny promise that no one would trip over the changing season. As she moved, a thought visited her like a well-mannered guest. Duty holds, care releases. Her winter task had been to hold the valley's sleep so that roots could be brave in the dark. Now her spring task would be to release that holding with tenderness so that the same roots could reach for light without shock. Nothing was being undone. Everything was being continued in a new key. At the lake's near edge, where the ice wore a blur of reeds like a crown, Lumi paused. The pocket at her shawl pulsed with the bell's soft beat, and a small circle of warmth opened on the air around her. Not hot, just welcoming. Fish beneath the ice shifted like thoughts settling into better thoughts. The lake did not crack. It listened. "Soon," Lumi told it, and the word sounded like a pebble placed in a perfect spot. "Soon we will remember your song." She looked back. The snowdrop at the old stone stood at attention, white and green and sure. The light at the eastern seam had grown by the width of a kind hand. The fox had curled in a wishbone of comfort, muzzle tucked to tail. A single chimney drew a line of patient smoke into a sky the color of milk and pearl. Everything still slept, and yet everything was getting ready to wake without being startled. Lumi placed one mitten gently over her pocket, feeling the steady bell through the weave. "Water, root, wing," she repeated, so softly the words became breath. "We will go in that order. We will go with care." Before she stepped onto the lake's edge, she lifted her foot and looked at the last oval impression she had left near the stone. The frost there had melted into a faint gleam, a shallow cradle for light. It would fade back to white as the air cooled. Nothing forced, nothing taken too far. Lumi nodded, pleased. The valley could accept this kind of touch, the kind that asks, then thanks. She closed her eyes for the space of 3 slow breaths, letting the bell count with her. 1 ring, rest. 2 rings, rest. 3 rings, rest longer. When she opened them, the day had brightened by a whisper. Somewhere, a branch released a thimbleful of snow, and it landed with a sound like a small yes. With that yes for company, Lumi stepped forward, carrying the bell light in her pocket, the valley's patience in her chest, and first light on her shoulders like a shawl. The lake waited, the roots listened, the birds dreamed, and the snowdrop steady at its stone rang once, only once, blessing the path that would wake the water, the root, and the wing. Lumi stood at the lake's near edge with the bell light warm in her pocket, listening to the day as it unspooled a little thread of brightness across the hills. The ice wore a thin veil of reed echoes. Beneath it, water held its voice the way a singer holds a final note in their chest. Not yet on the air, but ready. Lumi did not hurry. She knew the valley liked being asked before being answered. She knelt and brushed her mitten along the snow in a single, careful arc. The crystals caught the light and wrote something small that only listening could read. Lumi smiled. Frost, she knew, is a patient scribe. It writes messages for those who move at the speed of kindness. Little bell, she whispered, hand over her pocket. Show me how to walk so the water won't startle and the trees won't wake with a shiver. A glow answered through cloth, not bright, just certain. As Lumi watched, the frost at her knees rearranged itself grain by glittering grain into a line, then a curve, then a sequence of tiny symbols, silver embroidery on white cloth. There were 3 signs, each no larger than a raindrop: a gentle wave, a spiral root, and a feather's filament. Water, root, wing. Between them, thin paths braided like quiet thoughts. Lumi breathed the map in, letting it settle behind her eyes. Thank you, she told the frost, as if it had passed her a folded note in class. The frost shone bashfully and looked like ordinary frost again. From the tree line, the fox stepped out, the same fox who had yawned at the edge of the earlier light. He moved with the soft caution of a gentleman in a library, tail describing a comma above the snow. His fur kept the colors of leaf mold and bark, late winter rust and shadow, but his eyes were full of dawn. He stopped at a polite distance and lowered his head in greeting. I remember you, Lumi said. Spirits rarely use names for creatures. They use memories. You once tucked an orphaned seed in your den to keep it warm. The fox's ears softened with pride. He came closer, paws leaving no sound, only the neatest punctuation marks in the powder. He looked down at the place where the frost had written, then up at Lumi. Something like yes moved through his shoulders. You'll show me the quiet way around the lake? She asked. The fox's tail lifted and fell yes. He glanced toward the ridge, then toward the grove, then back to the lake's sighing horizon. A reminder that all paths here are friends and should be greeted accordingly. Lumi nodded. Water first, she promised. Then the roots, then the wings. Above them, a moth drifted out from the shadow under a peeled birch. It was a twilight moth, winter-born, its wings dusted with the gray of hearth ash and the pale of moonwash. The moth's flight drew calligraphy in the still air, each loop a lullaby letter. It circled Lumi once, twice, and settled on the toe of her boot as if to feel the warmth stored there. You have been keeping the night gentle, Lumi told it. The moth's antennae wrote a small thank you in the air. Then it rose and held itself just before Lumi's face, bobbing with the bell's pulse in her pocket. Some creatures hear with their eyes. The moth listened with its whole small body. We'll go together, Lumi said. Fox for earth, moth for air, and I will carry water's request. The three of them began to move along the lake edge, a procession as quiet as thinking. 2 steps, then pause. 2 breaths, then pause. Lumi felt the bell count with her, a soft metronome under her ribs. Where her feet pressed, the snow didn't collapse. It understood and made room. The fox threaded through reeds without rattling them. The reeds returned the favor by leaning away like courteous hosts. The moth rode the air's slow muscle and kept to the dim, where sunlight was a rumor, not a glare. Halfway along the shore, the hush wind rose. It did not rush or claw. Winter's last wind never does. It came like a long breath, misplaced a cool hand smoothing the lake's hair, affirming of the air's calm. The frost behind them crisped, knitting their softened ovals back into hard lace, as if to test whether Lumi's patience could be unstitched by a little insistence. The first pass of the wind skimmed her cheek. Lumi stopped and placed a mittened palm upon her pocket. The bell warmed her hand and stilled her breath. The fox braced his paws and narrowed his eyes into contented slits. He had felt many winters practice their closing chapters. The moth hung where it was, shivering its wings, not from cold, but from attention. The wind curled around again, firmer, asking a question without words. "Will you push?" Lumi answered without speaking. She put one knee into the snow and closed her eyes. Ring, rest, ring, rest longer. She remembered Thalen's warning she had not yet heard, but already understood in her bones. Hasty thaw breaks more than it mends. Lumi's job had never been conquest. It was conversation. So she conversed with the wind by breathing kindly. Her exhale recognized the wind's work, keeping ice clear enough to protect the fish, polishing snow to reflect the coldest nights away from bulbs. Her inhale asked if the wind was ready for a softer assignment. The bell in her pocket offered a third voice, neither wind nor warmth, just timing tiny, sure, the sound of dawn's second hand. The hush wind loosened a little, not in defeat, but in agreement. It traced a careful circle and settled to a whisper that made the birch's catkins tremble like small bells of their own. The frost still reknit her footprints, but more slowly now, leaving a soft edge as if to say, "I am ready to be persuaded." Lumi opened her eyes and met the fox's calm amber. "Thank you for waiting," she said, which is different than sorry. The fox's whiskers flicked in the shape of forgiveness, though nothing had been done wrong. The moth dipped once, sealing the moment like a stamp. They went on. At an inlet where the lake sent a small finger under a willow skirt, Lumi paused. The frost wrote again without being asked. This time the symbols were elongated, water script strokes like ripples, dots like dew. Lumi read them by feeling. If you ring here, ring once, then wait until the waiting becomes listening. She could almost hear the lake smother a smile. She turned to the fox. "Will you stand there, where the land meets the ice? Keep watch, not to guard, but to remember." The fox agreed and sat with the dignity of a hearth statue. To the moth she said, "Will you write the air, so the sound has a place to sit? The moth rose higher and drew a circle of slow loops overhead, a chair for a note not yet sung. Lumi set her feet in the willow's shade and lifted the bell light from her pocket. It did not feel like an object. It felt like a moment cupped, a promise with a handle. She held it at the height of her heart, because heart height is where most doors stand in a world that prefers kindness. "One ring," she breathed. The bell answered like a drop, becoming a ripple audible more to the spine than to the ear. It walked across the ice without cracking it, leaned under the willow as if asking permission, and curled down into the inlet's tunnel where winter stored its last hush. The hush felt itself heard, and in being heard, relaxed the smallest fraction. No sound of fracture, no sigh of defeat, only a soft easing, the thaw equivalent of a shoulder releasing a knot. Lumi lowered her hands. She did not ring again. Ring, rest, warm, listen, ask, then wait. The moth's loops widened and slowed. The fox blinked a complete blink and opened his eyes on a new gleam. Under the ice, the shadow of a ripple, not yet moving, but thinking about movement the way a sleeper thinks about waking. Minutes arrived like feathers, so light you barely notice until a small pile makes a pillow. Lumi breathed with the bell, with the lake, with the wind now folded into the willows like an old scarf. Far away, the snowdrop at the stone rang. Once Lumi felt it, rather than heard it approving, perhaps of patience. At length, the frost at her boots made one final message. It braided itself into a tiny map again, but more detailed now. The wave, the root, the feather repeated, and between them delicate stitches like paths on a child's palm. Around the wave symbol, the frost drew little crescents. Here the ice will thin. Here the song will start. Around the spiral, it dotted a quiet constellation. Here the sap will wake. Here the moss will smell of rain. Around the feather, it traced airy chevrons. Here the hush will learn to breathe. Here the first note will find a throat. Lumi touched one mitten to the map without pressing. "I understand," she said. "Thank you." The fox rose and shook out a snowflake or two that had come to rest in his ruff. The moth landed on Lumi's shoulder like an epaulette made of sleep. The hush wind pulled back to the ridge to mind its old work, but it watched them kindly, as a veteran watches a careful apprentice. "Water first," Lumi repeated, because promises are steadied by saying them aloud. Then roots, then wings. The bell in her pocket hummed a contented agreement, like a kettle just shy of boil. They retraced 3 steps to look again at the inlet. The ice did not crack. It sighed once. A thread of liquid blue so thin it might have been imagined sighed back. Then all was still, but it was a new still. Lumi turned from the lake's small beginning and looked across the valley. The cottages kept their quiet. The chimneys kept their modest lines of smoke. The birches kept their white composure. But under everything, she could feel readiness growing the way light grows inside a closed bud. The valley was listening now, not just sleeping. Listening is the last room before waking. "Messages received," she murmured to the frost, to the wind, to the fox and moth and patient lake will go on. And the bell, the smallest bell with the largest gentleness, hummed the map once more inside her palm wave. Spiral, feather, before settling back to stillness, like first light folding itself neatly at the edge of morning, waiting for the next page to be turned. Lumi stood beneath the willow's green ghost skirt, the bell light steady in her pocket, the fox a quiet comma at the seam of land and lake, the moth stitching slow, patient circles in the air. The inlet was a narrow throat where winter kept its last hush. The ice there was milky and thin as fine porcelain. She waited until waiting became listening, and listening became a doorway. Water, she whispered, not to summon, but to remember. Do you recall the shape of your name? The bell stirred a warm thread through cloth, and Lumi felt the note like a small hand taking hers. She took 2 slow steps and knelt, letting her knees find the exact places where the frost wished to be pressed. The ice did not protest. It understood courtesy. Lumi cupped the air above the inlet with her mittens, giving the silence a sheltered room. 1 ring, she promised. Only 1, and then we will rest. She drew the bell light from her pocket. It felt lighter than breath and more present than shadow, a soft lantern with no weight at all. Holding it at heart height, she closed her eyes and let the bell count 3 slow breaths with her. Ring, rest. Ring, rest longer. Ring, and let the world be still. On the 3rd breath, Lumi gave the smallest motion no swing, no flourish, only intention, and the bell sounded. It was not loud. It didn't need to be. The note fell into the inlet like a drop that had been traveling a long time to arrive exactly here. The ice did not crack. It listened. The sound traveled under the milk glass surface, the way spring travels through roots, invisibly first, decisively later. Lumi held her hands very still. The fox lowered his head. The moth paused mid-circle and shivered its wings in place, writing silence with silence. At first, there was nothing to see. Then, a faint line appeared so faint that you might mistake it for imagining running from the place where the bell's echo had touched the ice to a darker seam near the willow's submerged roots. The line lengthened, thinned, then vanished altogether, as if embarrassed by its own boldness. Lumi did not ring again. She let the 1 note keep doing its careful work inside the hush. Somewhere deep, the water sighed as a sleeper sighs when a dream turns kind. The sigh found its old channels, ran a fingertip along their edges, and said, "Yes, I remember." Bubbles that had been holding their winter breath loosened by the width of a thought. A fish, small and silver and brave, turned in its patient pocket and discovered that turning now made the smallest answer. It flicked its tail once, then stilled. No hurry, no rush, just the beginning of remembering. The wind that had tested them earlier folded itself into the willow's long green whispers, listening too. The reeds along the shore leaned like friends at a doorway. From the cottages a little farther up the bank, the faintest clink of a teacup told of hands waking without the rest of the house. Everything felt both the same and gently more possible, like a song whose first note had finally found the right key. Lumi breathed, letting the bell's warmth fade back into her mittens. She set the invisible lantern beside her on the air, letting it hang like a promise, and leaned close to the ice. Her breath fogged the surface in a small oval, and within that oval, the water looked back at her with a shy clarity. She could almost see the valley's summer reflected there. Quick glints, low flights of swallows, the scribble of rain. "You needn't rush," she told it. "Winter is not being dismissed, it's being thanked." The fox came nearer, paws making no more sound than thoughts. He touched the ice with the softest pad of one foot and lifted it again, leaving behind a print that looked like punctuation in a poem deliberate, calm. The moth floated down and rested on Lumi's sleeve, antennae measuring time with mercy. Under the inlet, the thin line returned. This time, it widened enough to show a river thread of blue, not moving, just thinking about movement. At its edge, a drop released itself from its glass ceiling and slid along the underside of the ice. It paused, grew by a breath, and let itself go drip. The sound was tiny and wonderful, like a pinprick of starlight finding a place to land. Another drop followed drip, then another drip. Drip each one, giving the inlet's hush a small, round window of sound. Lumi closed her eyes again. She listened for anything that might be startled. Roots, stones, sleeping snails, the delicate villages of frost. She heard only agreement, the kind of consent that feels like shoulders lowering, like a house settling contentedly on its foundation. Across the larger lake, the long sheet of ice did not crowd forward. It learned a new patience from the inlet's example. "Thank you," Lumi told the water. "Thank you for remembering." She sat back a little, and the bell light drifted toward her palm like a pet that has been allowed to roam and now returns to the familiar. As it settled, a single petal of its glow dimmed no sense of loss, only the quiet completion of a task. Lumi felt the change as one feels a candle that has burned just enough to scent the room. The bell's heart still warm, its work with water now marked. The fox stretched, front legs long, back arched into a hill of fur, then lowered himself to a comfortable watch. The moth took a lazy lap around Lumi's head and drew a wider circle in the air, as if giving the lake room to think. In the distance, the snowdrop at the stone gave a single, satisfied ring, a blessing, an echo, a yes, where the inlet narrowed to meet the lake proper. A darker seam softened, and the faintest ribbon of current pressed against its sleeve of ice with no intention of tearing it, only of greeting it. The lake's body, still strong with winter's shield, allowed the tiny pressure to exist the way a closed eye allows light to color the lids. This was not a flood. It was a rehearsal. Lumi dipped her mitten into the coldest touch of air above the seam and lifted it again, her palm cupped. She pretended to drink the cold. "For courage," she murmured, smiling, "for patience." Behind her, the willow released a thimble of snow from a high crook. It fell through the curtain of branches and landed close by with a sound like a polite secret. The bell seemed to enjoy the sound and answered it with a tender, almost amused hum that made the ice consider a new idea music. The first thread of liquid found a pebble and learned to go around it, a tiny lesson shared without fanfare. The second thread found the first, and together they practiced a word, like a mouth learning vowels after a long quiet. Beneath the frozen saucer of the main lake, these small rehearsals traveled as stories do through walls, changing nothing, promising everything. Rest now, Lumi told the bell and the water both. You've done enough for a morning. She set the bell light back inside her pocket, where it lay like sunrise folded in cloth. The warmth there felt less like heat and more like kindness given a place to live. She stood, and the snow received her weight as a compliment. The fox rose too, giving his ruff a single luxurious shake that made a tiny snowfall of its own. The moth lifted from her sleeve and hovered at her cheek for the space of one heartbeat, a kiss in the language of small wings before resuming its soft patrol of the willow's green shadows. Lumi looked across the lake. Nothing dramatic had changed, and yet everything had begun. A long way off, the ice made a sound like a house settling a friendly creak, and then was quiet again. Along the shore, the reeds had put their winter rattles down. In a cottage window, a curtain moved the slightest bit, as if a hand had swept it aside and then remembered the hour and let it fall. Soon, Lumi said, this time to no one and to all. She turned from the inlet and walked the bank, each step chosen with the same care one uses when turning the pages of an old book. Behind her, the frost considered closing her softened ovals and decided to leave them a fraction gentler than before a margin note in the day's brightening text. By the time she reached the curve where the lake opened like an eye toward the west, the sky had gained the color of warm milk poured over pearl. A distant thrush tried one vowel and tucked it away for later. The bell in her pocket lay quiet but awake, satisfied the way tools are satisfied when used as they were meant to be. At the shoreline, Lumi turned back for a last look at the willow. The inlet wore its small blue secret like a locket at its throat. Drip, drip. Not often, not loud, just enough to put commas in the hush. I'll return to listen, she promised. Water, having become itself a little more, held the promise the way water holds everything, completely, without keeping it from moving. Now, Lumi said to the fox and the moth, we go to the grove. She touched her pocket where the bell light rested, one petal dimmer and somehow more beautiful for it. Water remembers. Next, the roots will uncurl. The fox trotted ahead, tail drawing a soft exclamation mark in the air. The moth floated after, a small lantern of ash and moon. Lumi followed the road the frost had written for her, the braided path of wave, spiral, feather carrying the quiet victory in her shawl, and the valley's growing readiness in her breath. Behind them, the lake kept its dignified stillness, now laced with a private song, Not yet a melody, only the first kindness of sound returning. And somewhere near the old stone, the snowdrop lowered its white head, as if pleased to have spent a sliver of its light waking the world that would feed it by and by. One petal's glow had gone into water. The rest waited, patient as morning, for root and wing. Lumi left the willow's green ghost fringe and followed the path the frost had written, wave to spiral, water to root. The fox took the lead with a librarian's courtesy, stepping around twigs before they could think to crack. The moth drifted a little ahead, lantern small and moon pale, drawing slow spirals that matched the map stitched inside the snow. The bell light rested in Lumi's pocket, one petal dimmer, its remaining glow steady and content, like an ember that prefers storytelling to flame. The grove announced itself with a hush of tall beeches, arranged as if they had once been a choir and were now a congregation of kindly elders. Their smooth gray trunks rose like pillars gentled by time. At their feet lay last autumn's letters' leaves sealed with frost wax, edges curled into careful envelopes, sunlight filtered in thin and thoughtful, falling in bright commas and quiet ellipses. The air smelled like bark, like old paper, like the place where secrets choose to become wisdom. Here, Lumi said softly, here we will ask the earth to remember how to lift. The fox paused at the threshold and nodded. The solemn way animals nod when they recognize a room where listening goes all the way down. The moth descended to hover a hand's breadth above the leaf litter, its wings stirring the light in tiny tides. Lumi set her palm mittened, warm against a beech trunk, and felt the story sleeping inside. Sap that had traveled for years without complaint, rings that counted not victories, but seasons of patience, roots that held not just the tree, but the hills, the cottages, the lake, the fox's den, the paths of honest feet. Thank you for keeping the valley, she whispered. The bell in her pocket answered by warming the cloth, a pulse in time with the grove's deep heartbeat. Lumi knelt, and the leaves accepted her weight as a compliment. When she pressed her hand to the ground, the frost did what frost always does around her, it wrote. This time, the script ran low and round, a handwriting made of tunnels and threads, a map drawn with the alphabet of roots. Lumi read it by breath. Lay the bell among us, not upon us. Give warmth to soil, not to bark. Wake us from below, the way dawn wakes a sleeper's feet before it reaches the eyes. Ring once, then rest until the dark loosens its hand. I understand, she said, and the letters turned back into glitter, pleased to have been read. The fox curled himself into a question mark and watched with an answer already warming behind his eyes. The moth settled on a curled beech leaf, its body a comma in a green-gray sentence. Lumi slid the bell light from her pocket and kept it cupped, letting its gentle warmth gather like a promise, neither rushed nor hoarded. Little bell, she breathed, today we write to the roots. She searched for a place where the ground listened most keenly, the small hollow between three beech trunks, where the leaf litter had settled into a nest, and the soil beneath felt springy with dreams. Lumi dug with her mittened hands, not to disturb, but to make room, brushing aside the topmost leaves, the way one lifts the corner of a blanket to tuck a child's feet. The earth just beneath wore the color of coffee and smelled like yesterday's rain, deciding to be tomorrow's sap. She lowered the bell light into the hollow she had made. It did not sit on the soil. It rested with it, companionable and right, like a warm stone placed in cold hands. A breath later, the glow slipped downward out of sight, not lost, simply accepted, as if the ground had made a pocket for it the moment Lumi thought to offer it. "One ring," she promised. "Then we listen." She closed her eyes. The bell rang through her palms the way a remembered name rings through a quiet room. The sound did not travel up and out. It went down and in, spiraling like water finding the old well within the earth. It touched the threads of roots, beech, ash, birch, fern, and each thread answered with a tiny uncoiling, a loosening you could feel more than see. The ring became warmth, not heat that burns, but kindness that asks, "Would you like to stretch now?" Under the leaves, the soil softened by the width of a sigh. Tiny tunnels, earthworm streets, and beetle avenues welcomed the change and rearranged their furniture by feel. A seed the size of a freckle decided to believe in itself again and pushed a white question slowly into the dark. Bulbs that had been pressing their green thumbs against the underside of winter nudged once more, then once again, like polite guests hinting that they wouldn't mind standing up. Lumi did not reach for the bell to ring it a second time. She held her hands over the hollow as if keeping a teacup warm and let the listening do the rest. Her breath slowed. The fox closed his eyes and opened them halfway, the exact measure of trust. The moth lifted, hovered, and traced small spirals over the spot, as if drawing the motion the roots were remembering. The grove changed without seeming to change. Somewhere deep, sap moved. It did not rush. It rose. A beat later, the trunks replied to one another down their slow, dignified network. "I'm here. I'm here too. I'm waking with you." Moss at the bases of the beeches darkened a shade richer, then richened again until its color wore the scent of rain. A curled leaf uncrooked itself the width of a breath, revealing the faintest hint of green hidden in yesterday's brown. From under the leaf litter, the earth exhaled a smell that felt like the word home being said by a person who means it. Lumi smiled into the hollow. "Thank you for trusting such a small invitation." The bell's glow, buried and busy, gave one long, quiet pulse. Lumi felt it travel into her through the nerves in her hands, into the fox through the pads of his paws, into the moth through its gossamer bones, into the trees through their innumerable listening hairs. The pulse did not command. It reminded, and in being reminded, the grove did what it had always known how to do. Near Lumi's knee, a blade like a punctuation mark of green pressed up between two letters of last year's text. Another followed, shy and sure. The bulbs conversed in slow gestures. Here, then here. Left, then up. Wait, now. In a far corner of the grove, something made a sound like a drawer opening and closing softly. It was only a vole, setting its tiny house in order for the season to come. The vole paused, whiskers tasting the new taste in the air, and decided that today it would put 2 grains in the larder instead of 1. Lumi lifted her head and looked along the beach colonnade toward the valley beyond. Nothing loud had happened, and yet the whole world felt an inch closer to waking, which is to say, an inch closer to kindness. She brought her gaze back to the hollow and the unseen bell and offered the roots her gratitude in the currency they preferred. Time. After time had made a small mountain beside them, its grains too fine to see, but its shape surely present, the bell light rose back toward her hands in a gentle drift. It emerged leaf brown, root sweet, carrying the cool perfume of soil and the warm permission of spring. As it reached her palms, Lumi noticed that a second petal of its glow had dimmed, not gone out, simply given like a candle sharing flame with another, and finding itself no poorer. 2 awakenings complete, she said quietly. The words placed themselves into the grove like stones placed in a path, not to hurry feet, but to keep them from stumbling. The fox stood and stretched again, longer this time, as if his very bones were receiving the invitation to lengthen. He padded to Lumi's side and set his head briefly against her arm, a fox's thank you, which feels like a secret you are allowed to keep. The moth rose in a higher spiral and held there, lantern to the sky's pale ceiling. Before they left, Lumi pressed her mitten to the ground beside the hollow, a farewell with no taking in it. The frost wrote one last note that only kindness could read. Return at dusk to listen. Sap loves company. Lumi nodded. I will. They moved through the grove the way a blessing moves present, brief, complete. As they passed each beach, a shadow softened, a scent deepened, a patient dream put on shoes. At the grove's far edge, where snow thinned into grass that had been thinking of green for weeks, Lumi paused for one backward glance. There, between 2 roots that had once held a winter's worth of silence, a spear of new color lifted simple, ordinary, miraculous. Not yet a flower, not yet even a leaf, only the smallest insistence of life. It wavered once in the cool air, then steadied, as if finding the hand of a friend. Rest, Lumi told it. And it did, because resting and growing are not enemies in this valley. They are sisters who share a song. The bell light returned to her pocket, carrying with it a memory of loam and the taste of patience. In the distance, the lake held its new habit of dripping. Beyond the ridge, a bird cleared its throat for later. The wind above the grove's ceiling, remembering their earlier conversation, folded itself into a kinder shape and went off to polish a cloud. Water remembers. Lumi counted softly. Roots uncurl. She turned toward the ridge where Wing would be waiting, and the path the frost had braided glittered ahead, feather stitch, bright, airy, and sure. As she stepped from shade into the open, the sun, still careful, still modest, thinned the cold by the measure of a teacup. The fox's shadow found her boots and walked there for the comfort of it. The moth slipped into the warmer seam above the path and wrote the gentlest script the sky could read. Behind them, the grove settled into its new rhythm. Sap whispered, moss breathed. The sealed letters of last autumn loosened their wax and prepared to become the soft paper on which spring would write. And somewhere back near the old stone, the snowdrop dipped its white head and rang, once no louder than a heartbeat under blankets, pleased that a second circle of light had been spent wisely, with time, with listening, with love. The path to the ridge was stitched with feather-light frost. A pale seam, the moth followed as if reading a familiar line in the sky's diary. The fox trotted just ahead, tail riding a calm exclamation mark that never shouted. Behind them, the grove held its new hush, sap speaking to sap in the old, slow language of roots. To their left, the lake rehearsed the smallest syllables of song drip, pause, drip like a child practicing vowels under a blanket. Lumi walked at the bell's pace, 2 gentle steps, then a breath, 2 more, then listening. In her shawl pocket, the bell light rested 2 petals dimmed now, the remaining glow steady as a promise. As she climbed, the air thinned in the kind way, not absence, but a clearer room. The ridge grew from under her feet rather than ahead of them, rounding its shoulders to receive the day. They reached the tree line where winter's lace still hung from the fir tips, each needle wearing a bright cuff of frost. Beyond, the ridge opened into sky. The world lifted its own chin. Lumi paused, letting her eyes grow soft so the light could arrive without brashness. The moth rose to the canopy and hovered there, a little moon pinned to a green roof. The fox sat and looked over the valley like someone who loves a house they do not own but care for as if they did. Under the firs, birds slept in their small fortresses of twig and memory, heads tucked backward under wings, beaks hidden in down. The nests were cups of patience lined with things the world had finished, with feathers, hairs, grass that had told its last summer story, and now all of it was becoming cradle. No one hurried. The sky itself seemed to be holding its breath, not from fear, but from good manners. Lumi placed her mittened hand on a fir trunk. Cold spoke up through her palm. Tall, resin, sweet, faithful. "Thank you," she said, "for giving birds a roof and winter a place to shine." The bell warmed faintly against her ribs. She knelt and listened, not for noise, but for the shape of the quiet. There was a rhythm here, slow in, slower out, a long rest between. The sky was sleeping the way a child sleeps after being carried deep and trusting. "Wing," she whispered. "Shall we teach the air to breathe again?" The frost near her boots wrote a little answer, each crystal leaning as if nodding. "Ring above us, not within us. Give the air a doorway, and we will fly through when ready. One ring. Rest until feathers remember." Lumi lifted the bell light from her pocket. It rose in her hands like a warm moth, and the actual moth answered by circling higher, tracing a soft halo over the fir tops. "We'll ring not to wake," but to invite, Lumi promised. The fox's ears tipped forward the way curtains tilt when a window is opened a finger's width. She stood where the ridge's gentle back met the first branch tips and raised the bell to heart height. Not a flourish, only a lifting. She closed her eyes and counted with the valley's pulse. Waters drip, roots slow rise, the hidden thud of her own steady heart. On the third breath, she gave the bell the smallest motion, more intention than movement, and let the note cross from her hands into the morning. It was a thin sound, a thread drawn through cloth, bright but not sharp, silvery but not cold. It climbed a little, then softened, as if finding a perch just above the trees where it could sit and smile. The note did not tug on nests or pry at pine cones. It made a space in the air, a room with open windows and a warm chair so breath would want to come live there. The moth hovered in that new room and drew slow circles, widening the doorway. The fir tips shook off one lace cuff of frost each, the way old men shake rain from hats they love. A breeze less a wind than a remembered habit visited, sniffed around, and stayed, learning the story the bell was telling. In, out, together. Under the branches, wings shifted, feathers whispered against feathers, a quiet rustle like linen being folded. A thrush tried one note with its beak still tucked in, discovered there was no reason to be loud, and tried another. Not song yet, only the testing of a hinge. A wren woke and found the world the same safe size. A blackbird opened one eye, closed it again, and smiled into sleep. Waking, here, would be allowed to take the long way. Lumi lowered the bell and rested it against her chest. She did not ring again. The sky had heard the invitation. Repetition would be rudeness. She sat on a cushion of old needles and let her back rest against the fir's straight confidence. The fox lay down at her feet, chin on paws, tail wrapped like a scarf around his ankles. The moth drifted to and fro at the canopy's edge, a slow pendulum teaching the air a kind of hour that didn't need clocks. The sky breathed, not a gale, not even a breeze, more the sure returning of motion. A strand of mist unhooked itself from a branch and went to see what the valley was doing. Another followed, and together they became a ribbon. Far off, a cloud that had been a cupboard all winter thought about becoming a sail. At the ridge's gentle crown, the air practiced a sigh and learned it could do so without losing its dignity. Feathers began to tidy themselves. A titmouse fluffed and resettled, pleased by the way its tiny bones felt lighter. Two newshatches conversed in the briefest notes here, and then agreed to postpone the talk until breakfast. A crow, ever the big sister, stepped from her high cradle to a nearby bough and looked around to be sure the world had not done anything foolish while she slept. Satisfied, she let her body become heavier again and stayed where she was. "Thank you," Lumi said into the air, "for accepting the bell, for taking the lesson kindly. There is no rush." The bell agreed by cooling a degree and humming once, not on the ear, but in the sternum where promises are stored. A little while later, when time had accumulated like soft lint in the corners of the morning, The sky exhaled a shade more deeply. The sound was almost laughter, but more like relief. The bell did not ring. It listened. Down the slope, the lake heard and loosened its shoulder. In the grove, sap lifted a spoonful more. The valley's breaths found one another, a choir assembling with no conductor but patience. In a nest nearby, a fledgling last year's late student stretched a neck that had spent winter tucked. It opened and closed its beak a few times, then folded itself back, trusting the day to arrive without its help. On a higher branch, a robin looked toward the east seam and tilted its head as if listening for footsteps on a familiar path. It would be ready soon. Not yet. Soon. Lumi felt the bell's work reaching its paws. She raised it once more, not to sound but to bless. Held just at the level of her heart, the bell light pulsed long and soft. The moth drifted down and traced a figure 8 over Lumi's wrist, looping a ribbon around the moment to keep it tidy. The fox stood and shook out his coat, snow, needles, tiny stars of frost dropping at his feet, and took 2 polite steps closer, as if to say, "I saw that, and it was good." When Lumi lowered the bell, a 3rd petal of its glow had dimmed. The lantern in her hands was smaller by light, larger by meaning. She slipped it gently into her pocket and felt it settle there like a secret promise kept. 3 awakenings now: water, root, wing, and yet the valley still dreamed at its center, the big, sweet sleep that anchors all the smaller ones. She looked out from the ridge. The cottages kept their slow breaths, chimney threads stitched higher into a paler sky. The lake retained its porcelain dignity, but the inlet wore a thin smile. The grove, from here, looked like a book whose pages had been fanned and set down air between leaf and leaf. Over everything, first light moved a thumb-width deeper, peach and pearl mixing with a very gentle blue. "Not finished," Lumi said, to herself and to the world. "Only begun well." The hush wind, the same that had tested her by the lake, returned over the ridge, but it had changed uniforms. It came now as a caretaker, not a guard, smoothing the bell's quiet across the firs, then folding it away for later use. It braided itself through the moth's slow path and did not tangle. It lifted the fox's fur and set it back the way it had found it, like a friend who straightens a collar with love. Before she left, Lumi walked under 3 nests and gave each a look that was not a stare, just the kind of noticing that leaves a room warmer. "When you are ready," she told them, "the sky remembers how." A feather, small and striped, let go of its high shelf and floated down, rocking as if a hand were rocking it. Lumi caught it in her palm and felt the tiny architecture shaft, barbs, the almost invisible hooks that hold softness to strength. She tucked it into the edge of her shawl, not a trophy, a lesson. Strength knows how to be soft. Softness knows how to be strong. They turned to go. The moth dipped once, twice, to say it would follow. The fox led them down a gentler slope, threading a path between snow and sun where footprints became suggestions instead of statements. Behind them, The air they had taught went on breathing, the way a melody goes on in a room after the musician has left. At the tree line, Lumi looked back only once. A robin, braver now, stepped out to a slimmer branch and sent a single note down the hill, a round, golden bead of sound that did not insist on being noticed. It was enough. The first bead on a string to be shaped later, when the morning's light was taller. "Thank you," Lumi whispered to the sky, the trees, the nests, the patient feathers. "Keep practicing." The sky, being generous, did. They descended toward the valley's quiet heart, where one meadow waited the way a chest waits between two restful breaths. The bell warmed again through cloth, not with urgency, but with direction. Lumi felt the map hum against her palm wave, spiral, feather, completed, and then a fourth shape, almost a circle, almost a bloom. The Heart Meadow calling, not loudly, only the way home calls, when the key is already in your pocket. 3 petals dimmed, 3 places blessed. Water had remembered, roots had uncurled, wings had learned the sky's old rhythm, and still the valley dozed, safely, sweetly, at the center of itself. That was good. That was right. Waking, here, would not be an alarm. It would be a turning toward light made of listening. Lumi walked on with the fox and the moth, the ridge at her back, the gentle pull of the Heart Meadow before her. In her pocket, the bell light rested like dawn folded small, waiting to be opened by careful hands. Above them, the sky breathed quiet in, quiet out, carrying their steps in its soft, endless lungs. Lumi left the ridge behind, carrying the bell light in her pocket, steady against her side. 3 petals of its glow had already dimmed themselves in quiet service. 1 to water, 1 to root, 1 to wing. The fox padded at her heel, copper fur dappled with pale frost like brushstrokes. The moth drifted in slow figure eights, its ash and moon wings folding and opening with the rhythm of a sleepy breath. Ahead of them lay the quiet heart of the valley. From far above, if one could look down the way a cloud looks, the Heart Meadow would seem simple, a soft bowl of land where the hills curled in close, keeping out the harsh wind, keeping in warmth like cupped hands. But from here, where Lumi stood, the meadow held a hush so deep and whole it felt like the last page of a lullaby. Snow slept here in an even blanket, smooth and unbroken. The air itself seemed wrapped. Sound here did not bounce. It curled, rested, and stayed. Lumi stopped at the meadow's edge. Her breath left her in a slow white ribbon. The bell warmed once, then went still as if to murmur. "Listen first." The fox sat, politely. The moth landed on Lumi's shoulder and folded its wings, settling like a brooch made of twilight. Lumi lowered her head. "I'll ask permission," she whispered, because this was not just any quiet. This was the last quiet of winter. Something in the meadow heard her. The snow did not move. The air did not stir. Nothing leapt up, nothing cracked, nothing rushed. Instead, a presence arrived the way dusk arrives, not all at once, not boldly, but everywhere at once, soft and certain, until you realize you are surrounded not by darkness, but by gentleness. At first, it felt like temperature, a cool that wasn't cold, like the inside of polished stone. Then it felt like weight, not heavy, but settled, like a hand resting across your back to steady you. Then it began to take a shape. Before Lumi, in the hollow where the meadow dipped deepest, the light bent. It bent the way heat bends air above a candle flame, except it was winter light, pale, silvery, faintly blue. The bend gathered and thickened until a figure stood there, as if drawn from the steam of late snow and the patience of old ice. Tall, cloaked in grays and whites and faint silvers, layered like old bark, like riverstone, like frost layered on frost. Hair long and hanging like thawing icicles, clear at the edges, shoulders broad with age, but not cruel age, the kind of age that has seen many springs and learned to love them gently, not let them hurry. His eyes were not cold, they were still, like the surface of a lake that can reflect stars without shaking them apart. He did not step toward Lumi. He let Lumi stand at the edge and kept his distance, because good keepers know how not to loom. Lumi bowed her head, not out of fear, but out of respect. Thalen, she said softly. His name moved like snow sliding from a branch in a single smooth sheet. Thalen, keeper of late winters, the one who watched the last cold of the year so that it wouldn't be taken too fast or broken in a way that would harm what slept beneath it. Thalen inclined his head in return. His cloak made a faint sound, not fabric, not ice, more like frost brushing against itself. "You have been ringing," he said. His voice was low and even, like a cello being played under blankets. Not scolding, not surprised, just stating what the land already knew. "Yes," Lumi said, "you woke the water. I asked the water to remember, and the roots. I asked the roots if they were ready to stretch, and the sky. I offered the air a place to breathe." Thalen watched her, as still as a tree in deep January. "And you would wake this," he said. He did not gesture. He didn't need to. The whole Heart Meadow was his gesture. Lumi took in a slow breath. "I would help it turn toward spring," she answered, truly. Not all at once, not by force, only with care. Thalen's gaze drifted to the fox, then to the tiny moth resting like a pale coin on Lumi's shoulder, then back to Lumi. His eyes softened, just slightly. "You are young," he said. "I am," Lumi agreed, with no apology in it. "You are gentle. I try. And you are wrong just a little." Lumi did not flinch. She only waited. Thalen let the snow breathe around his boots. "Do you know," he asked quietly, "why there must always be a last cold?" Lumi answered honestly. "To keep seedlings from rising too fast and breaking their own stems. To tell the sap wait just one more night. To hold back meltwater so the stream doesn't rush and flood the burrows." Thalen nodded once. "Good, you've listened." He let a silence stretch, not empty, but full. Lumi could feel the age in it. Years and years of endings done slowly enough that beginnings would not tear. This valley, Thalen said at last, does not fear spring, but it fears being startled. Lumi lowered her eyelashes. I know. Many spirits, Thalen said, believe that their work is to bring light as fast as they can carry it. They swing spring open like a door in a storm, and the new shoots snap. Riverbanks fall in, nests are soaked through, waking becomes injury. Lumi's mittened hands folded over her pocket where the bell rested. I won't do that. Thalen's gaze, lake still, patient, stayed on her. Words are not proof, he said. Care is proof. Lumi nodded. Then test me. The fox's ears flicked. The moth lifted, hovering now between Lumi and Thalen like a tiny lantern, ready and unafraid. The bell warmed against Lumi's palm, as if it too understood what was being asked. Thalen tilted his head just a fraction in what might have been approval. Very well, he said. This is my trial. The snow around Thalen shimmered, a slow ripple like breath under thick blankets. The air cooled, but softly, not biting. Lumi felt the calm weight of his presence settle deeper into the meadow, and with it, something else. A boundary, not a wall, a tone. You may wake the valley, Thalen said, voice quiet as a din. But you must do it in a way that does not break my keeping. You must move warmth without startling. You must ask the snow to loosen without letting it run wild. You must call light without making it glare. If even one den floods, if one bud burns, if one feather is shocked awake before its blood is ready to carry heat, then I will close winter's hand again, and you will wait another turning. Lumi closed her eyes. She could feel, with her whole self, the balance he kept. Here, just under the clean white sheet of snow, lay sleeping seeds that would split if warmed too sharply. Roots of meadow flowers curled like kittens, still dreaming. Field mice nests tucked under dead grass domes, small families breathing in a slow, shared rhythm. Pockets of dormant beetles, quiet as carved beads, all of them held by this last cool hand of late winter, protected from the sudden and the fierce. Lumi opened her eyes again. I understand, she said. Thalen's gaze did not waver. How will you do it? Lumi didn't answer with words. Instead, she took a single slow breath in and out and placed both mittened hands gently over her pocket. The bell light, understanding the request, warmed like a teacup passed between friends. She didn't lift it. She didn't ring it. Not yet. She stepped instead into stillness. Her breath fell into the same rhythm as the meadows, slow in, slower out. She let her shoulders drop and then lower still until even her bones felt quiet. Her heartbeat softened and aligned itself gently to the long, low thrum beneath the snow, the layered heartbeats of sleeping roots, mice, seeds, beetles, clover crowns. She wasn't above them now. She was among them. The fox, seeing this, laid himself flat and tucked his nose to his tail, joining the meadow's rhythm. The moth folded its wings mid-air and floated, weightless, trusting the air to hold it. Even Thalen grew quieter, like a still pond calming until you can see your own face in it. Lumi waited until the air, the snow, the soil, and her own small body were breathing together. Only then did she draw out the bell. It left her pocket like dawn being cupped in careful hands, soft light with no edges. A glow you feel on your skin more than you see with your eyes. 3 petals were dim now, given to water, root, wing. What remained was gentler, warmer, closer to a heartbeat than a lantern. Lumi held it not high, not like a banner. She held it low, close to her middle, close to the snow. Then she whispered, not waking, just turning, and she moved the bell, not in a circle, not in a line, in a slow pulse. Warm, rest, warm, rest longer, warm, and let the meadow decide. The bell did not ring out. It hummed in. The warmth that left it wasn't a rush. It wasn't even heat in the way fire understands heat. It was permission. Under the snow, the tiniest layers loosened, not melted, loosened. The topmost powder unlatched itself from the crust below and made room for air to slip in like soft fingers. Air, in turn, kissed the sleeping stems and told them, soon, not now, but soon. Moisture answered, not with a flood, with a dew, a soft damp, the kind that gives soil the first sip without drowning it. Little burrows stayed sealed, tight, and safe. Mouse nests stayed dry. The beetles felt the hint of change and rolled deeper by instinct, as if tucking themselves back under a blanket edge. The clover crowns stirred and relaxed again. No one panicked. Lumi let the pulse continue. Warm, rest. Warm, rest. Warm, listen. And she listened. She listened for strain. She listened for fear. She listened for pain. She found none. Instead, she felt something else blooming out through the meadow floor, up through the thin crust of late snow and into her hands. Relief, not hurry. Relief, the kind of relief you feel when someone lifts a heavy quilt just an inch from your shoulders so you can take an easier breath, not stripping you bare, not making you cold, just letting your lungs say thank you. Thalen watched. His eyes, still as lake water, changed just a little, not melting, but softening, like ice that has decided it trusts the sun. Lumi slowed the bell's hum, softer, softer, until it was only a warmth in her mittens, and then only a memory of warmth. She drew it back toward her chest, and the glow tucked itself in, quiet and obedient. The meadow, in answer, settled again. The snow lay smooth, but now, if you looked very closely, you could see the faintest rounding here and there, gentle domes where small green things below had lifted their shoulders an inch, then relaxed under a looser blanket. The air changed, too. Barely. The cold lost its bite, but kept its clarity. It felt like clean sheets, like cool glass, like a promise being kept the correct way. Thalen said nothing for a long moment. Lumi bowed her head, still breathing with the valley. At last, Thalen spoke. You did not wake them, he said. Lumi lifted her gaze. No, you let them wake themselves. Yes, she whispered. Thalen's mouth moved, not a smile, exactly, but the shadow of one, a thought of spring smiling through winter's face. This, he said quietly, is acceptable. The fox's tail thumped once against the snow. The moth resumed its slow content drift. Lumi felt her shoulders soften, like a string finally settled to the right note. Thalen inclined his head to her deeper, now than before. Respect given, not just offered. His form flickered faintly, as if reminding them that he was both here and part of everything around them. You may continue, he said, but remember this. Waking is not opening the door and shouting. Waking is sitting on the edge of the bed and laying a warm hand on the blanket until the dream turns toward morning on its own. Lumi nodded. I understand. Thalen's shape began to soften back into winter light, edges loosening like mist stepping backward into shade. But before he was gone, his voice reached her one last time, low and kind. The Heart Meadow is waiting for you. You will not force it. You will invite it. Then he was gone, not with a flash, with a settling. As if the snow had simply decided to keep his outline for a while longer. Lumi stood at the meadow's edge, holding the bell low against her middle. In her hands, its glow had dimmed again, a fourth petal given. It felt smaller now, quieter, but not weaker. No, closer, more intimate, like something that now belonged not just to her, but to the valley and every sleeping thing inside it. She exhaled in a slow, content ribbon. Thank you, she whispered to the snow, to the quiet, to Thalen's lingering calm. Thank you for trusting me. The fox pressed his head against her leg, the way foxes do when they want you to know you are not alone. The moth brushed her cheek with one wing, soft as a fingertip. Lumi turned her face toward the center of the valley, where the Heart Meadow curved like a breath between dreams. Tomorrow, she told it gently, tomorrow we'll wake together. And the bell, small now, warm, steady, hummed like first light behind closed eyes, ready for the trial of quiet dawn. The night thinned by the width of a sigh. At the edge of the Heart Meadow, Lumi stood with the fox at her heel, and the moth poised like a little moon upon her shoulder. In her pocket, the bell rested smaller, now 4 petals of glow, already given its warmth, the kind that refuses to scald, preferring instead to stay, to steady, to promise. Thalen's charge lived in her chest like a quiet drum. Wake the valley without breaking his keeping. Invite, do not insist. She closed her eyes to measure the dark. It was the good kind, kindly, even. The kind that keeps birds quiet and children asleep, that remembers where your hand is in the blankets. She matched it breath for breath, inhale, slower exhale, and waited until waiting became listening, and listening became a soft place to begin. Ring, rest, listen, she whispered, as much to herself as to the dawn. The bell warmed through cloth, answering without urgency. Lumi lifted it into her cupped hands, not up high, just high enough for her heart to see it. The fox looked up, amber eyes dusky and calm. The moth's wings opened, shut, opened again, tiny doors, practicing welcome. Lumi did not move her arms. She moved the moment. She let the bell hum the smallest thread of sound, no louder than a memory, then stopped and counted the spaces the note created. She laid a breath in each space. She listened for strain and found none. She listened for startle and found only the quietest leaning toward morning, as if the valley had rolled its head on the pillow and settled more comfortably. She tried again. Hum, rest. The second hum found a seam in the night and stitched a little dawn into it, one faint peach thread at a time. Over the cottages, darkness softened from velvet to felt. Chimneys that had slept like pencils on a desk became gentle charcoal lines. Beneath a roof of old slate, an elderly kettle remembered its name and breathed one polite hiss, then settled back as if to say, "I'm awake enough to wait." "Good," Lumi murmured. "That's good." She turned her body a finger's width and gave the bell another breath of sound, this time toward the birch line. Not a sweep, a beam, thin and warm as a fingertip on a frosted window. The birches received it like a letter, opened it with care, and blushed at the edges pearl before white. A single catkin trembled and held. No drip, no slough. Patience remained intact. Lumi rested again. Long rest, longer still. She could feel Thalen's keeping spread beneath the meadow like polished stone, cool and constant. The snow's topmost skin unlatched another stitch, making room for air to join without letting go of its duty. Somewhere under the neat hayricks, mice breathed together like a small accordion, out, in, never once speeding up. The moth lifted from her shoulder, hovered above her hands, and drew a slender figure 8 in the air, looping the bell's gentle sound into a shape that could linger. The fox trotted 2 quiet steps, then lay down facing the cottages as a friend faces a friend who is still sleeping present, but not looming. Hum, rest. She sent the bell's next kindness along the overlook toward the lake, not to the water itself, which had already begun its soft remembering, but to the edges where frost cuffs the reeds and keeps them from rattling. The note met that lace with respect. Frost loosened where it wanted to. The smallest curl unfurled. A seam of mist unpinned itself from the shore and wandered out to see what color the day might choose. "Thank you," Lumi breathed, as if the frost could hear gratitude in warmth alone. She waited. She always waited. Between each offering, she let the valley answer, changing nothing she had not been invited to change. Twice, a long, round silence draped itself over everything. Twice, she kept her hands still, smiling into the quiet instead of filling it. Quiet is a cup. It deserves to hold something beautiful for its own sake. A curtain stirred in a cottage window, the gentlest ripple of lace, and fell back. Behind another, a hand found the edges of a blanket and tucked a sleeping child's shoulder. The bell did not speak to the child. It spoke to the light that would meet her eyelids in an hour, asking it to be careful, to arrive like a dream finishing well. Ring, rest, listen, Lumi reminded the day, and the day obeyed. She walked 3 steps along the meadow's rim, the kind of steps that leave the snow looking only slightly more certain of itself. With each step, she turned the bell just enough to bless another corner of the valley, a fence where frost had been counting the slats all night, a row of garden beds under quilted straw, each one a promise, a narrow footbridge above the stream's mouth, sturdy and waiting, its rail cool as a kind forehead. Hum, rest, and listen. From far above, where yesterday's wind had changed its coat and become a caretaker, a breeze arrived wearing good manners. It carried the bell's thought farther than Lumi could throw her voice over the back meadow, across a marker stone half buried like a sleeping seal, around a hayrick that held last season's meadow song in its tight straw heart. The breeze did not rush. It curated. It folded the hum into the morning, like a music teacher laying out parts and trusting the choir to come in when it's ready. Thalen's presence, unseen but felt, watched from the cool, not suspicion witness. A certain steadiness under the snow eased its pressure by the weight of a sigh. The trial was not a ticking clock. It was a scale, and Lumi had learned how to lay feathers upon it. Hum, rest. By the birch line, a robin risked a single bead of sound. It did not break the quiet. It finished it. The note found the bell's room in the air and sat in it, perfectly at home. If music could smile without teeth, it would have sounded like that. Lumi lowered the bell to her lap and breathed, the way one breathes over a sleeping infant. The moth settled on the bell's warm rim. The fox shut his eyes but kept his ears awake. All through the meadow, small domes appeared and softened as unseen green shoulders lifted and reclined again beneath the loosening quilt. No one hurried. The hum had become a habit. The habit had become a comfort. The comfort was becoming a morning. She moved a little farther along the rim and raised the bell once more. This time, she turned her wrist toward the cottage's chimneys and gave a hum no bigger than a spoon. The note climbed the cool bricks, warmed there, and slid down into stovepipes to tell the ashes that their work was honored and done. In 3 houses, the faintest tang of last night's soup said hello to the air and then went back to sleep. A clock somewhere decided not to strike yet. Good, Lumi whispered. Stay soft. She considered the ridge, to the nests under fir and the rim of sky that had relearned breath at her asking. She hummed a narrow ribbon toward them, not to rouse, only to keep the windows open. A thrush turned once under its wing and remembered a song as if it were a dream. The sky breathed in, out, no louder than a cat purr, no thinner than silk. Time kind, uncounted, gathered on the meadow like frost brightening. Lumi's arms grew pleasantly heavy. The bell in her hands felt very close to her own heartbeat, as if the two had agreed to take turns. When she rested, it kept time. When it rested, she did. Together, they made a steady, nearly invisible music. She tried one more direction, the low stone wall that divided orchard from path. Along its top, the snow broke into smooth beads where the hum had warmed it, pearls on a gray string. Beneath that line, a vole opened a small door and tasted the air with his whiskers. Cool, safe. He closed the door again, moved 2 crumbs from one shelf to another, and fell back asleep, feeling mysterious and clever. Lumi smiled. The moth looped a slow ribbon in the higher air and returned to her shoulder with the solemnity of a page completing a message. The fox stood, stretched in a single careful line, and touched his nose to the snow as if signing his name. The bell cooled not to cold, but to a readiness that no longer needed to prove itself. Lumi slid it back into her pocket. 4 petals dim, their gifts set down exactly where they belonged. What remained glowed like a coal in a nest of ash, quiet, alive, satisfied with small work done well. She stood and let her hands fall to her sides. The valley held. Not a rush anywhere, not a sharpness, only a tenderness spread across roofs and rails and reeds, a tenderness that made each surface rounder, each shadow gentler, each breath easier to take. The lake kept its porcelain dignity and its drips new habit. The grove cherished its secret stirrings. The ridge cradled its bird rooms like a careful hand, and the Heart Meadow turned its face a fraction toward light without opening its eyes. A coolness gathered beside her, the friend kind, and she knew Thalen had come to stand without appearing. The snow underfoot remembered the outline of his presence, and the air honored it by staying clear. "You did not shake them," Thalen said, his voice like a log settling in a stove, deep, clean, inevitable. "No," Lumi answered, keeping her eyes on the meadow. "I asked the morning to be gentle. It was." A pause rest, even now. Lumi matched it. "The cottages have exhaled," Thalen went on, as if noting the weather. "The frost has loosened without slush. The nests remain dry. The field mice keep sleeping." Lumi let the smallest smile find her. "Then the trial has begun well," Thalen said. She heard the half smile in his tone, the winter version of approval. "We will keep measuring. I will keep listening. And resting," he added. "And resting," she promised. The coolness that marked him shifted like a mindful cloud. "One place remains unopened," he said, though they both could feel it. "The Heart Meadow. It will need more than hum and habit. It will need your hand on the blanket." "I will not pull," Lumi answered. "I will warm." He said nothing, which was consent. The moth brushed her cheek, a tiny benediction. The fox nosed the air and sneezed once, softly, the way even foxes celebrate good news. Lumi looked into the meadow's white, even face, and saw. Beneath it, the smallest arch of green readying itself, the faintest ring of bells thinking about being flowers. "Not yet, not yet, soon. Rest now," she told the valley, the bell, herself. "The quiet has work to do." And the quiet, pleased to be trusted, set about doing it, carrying the trial of dawn through every leafless twig and shuttered window, keeping the world soft while it turned a finger's width closer to morning. The Heart Meadow lay before Lumi as a smooth white bowl, its rim held by the gentle hands of the hills. Nothing hurried here. Sound chose not to travel far, as if it preferred to sit down and rest beside whoever made it. The snow unbroken, even nobly simple, kept the meadow sleeping with the dignity of a carefully tucked quilt. Beneath that quilt, 1,000 small lives breathed together, each one quiet as a thought. Lumi stood at the edge and listened until her listening felt like part of the place. Not waking, she reminded herself softly. Turning, the fox pressed his shoulder to her boot, a steady warmth. The moth drifted to hover before her face, its ash and moon wings moving like a hush. In Lumi's pocket, the bell light rested smaller than before. 4 petals of glow, already given to water, root, wing, and the trial of dawn. What remained was intimate, a coal of kindness, a presence more than a brightness. She took 2 steps down the bowl's inner slope. The snow gave slightly, but did not collapse. It understood her careful weight and welcomed it. Everywhere she looked, the meadow held the exact shape of resting. Everywhere she felt, the meadow leaned the tiniest fraction toward morning. Here, she said, though she hadn't chosen a here yet. The word found its own path down the slope, across the white, into a small hollow near the meadow's center, where a flat stone showed its round shoulder through the snow, like a seal surfacing to breathe. The stone's skin wore a glaze of frost, thin as glass. A ring of calmer snow lay about it, as if the wind had been taught manners at this spot. Lumi knelt by the stone and removed a mitten. The air kissed her bare fingers with a cool so clean it felt like calm water. She laid her palm flat against the stone. A shiver of memory climbed into her hand, neither warmth nor cold, but time. In the stone's patience, she saw the meadow in other winters, the bowl brimful of snow, the rim of hills careful as always. She saw thawings come and go with no accidents, no rips in the season's fabric. And then, seen through the stone as through clear ice, she saw a bright, small thing. A snowdrop blooming here long ago, white bells nodding under first light, a promise set like a pearl in the valley's throat. "This is where you first rang," Lumi whispered. The memory returned her whisper with a yes, too old for words. She pulled her mitten back on and brushed the frost from the stone's crown. The bell in her pocket warmed once a heartbeat on the hand, then lay quiet again, as if saying, "I'm ready when the meadow is ready." The fox sat nearby, his tail wrapped neatly, his amber eyes reflecting the white and the idea of green beneath it. The moth rose to a taller stillness, riding a slow halo above the stone that was almost there and then there, the way dawn is. Lumi pressed both palms flat to the snow at the stone's base and breathed until the breath of the meadow matched hers. The quiet here was not empty. It was full of sleepers who trusted being kept. She spoke not aloud, but along that trust. "I will not pull your covers. I will warm the air under them." She reached into her pocket and drew out the bell light. It came into her hands like a warm sip, no flare, no spark, only presence. She did not lift it high. She lowered it, and with her mittened thumbs, she opened a small mouth in the snow at the stone's foot, a careful, shallow oval where the air could meet the earth without argument. Beneath, the soil waited with a patience that felt like love. "Little bell," she said, as if to a friend who had made a long journey. "Go home." She set the bell light inside the oval. It did not sit on the dark. It settled into it, accepted the way a hand is accepted by a hand that has been waiting. The glow moved down through crumb and root hair, not like a light falling, but like a quiet returning. Lumi cupped her hands over the mouth she had made, closing the snow gently, but not sealing it. She left room for breathing. Then she waited. The fox waited. The moth hung like a small moon. The meadow breathed. No ringing yet, no hum. Only the steady alignment of a promise with its place. Deep in the soil, something answered. The answer rose not as heat, but as courage. The courage found a bulb asleep in a brown coat and tapped. Not a knock, a fingertip. The bulb thought of green the way a dream thinks of waking, and pressed one white question toward the surface. At the same time, a thread of warmth lengthened along root hairs like tea wicking through cloth. It reached last year's veins, rusted and dry, but still arranged like a map, and traced tomorrow's path upon them, this way, then this. All around, seeds the size of freckles shifted their small minds to belief. Mice in the hay domes kept sleeping. Beetles tucked deeper, unstartled, unhurried. No den leaked, no nest dampened. The blanket loosened by the width of a smile. Lumi placed her palm back on the stone and felt the rise. Not much, just enough to prove the story true. She closed her eyes. In the calm behind them, she saw the bell light below her hands unfurl as a flower, white as breath. Green marked at the throat like a signature. It did not shine hard. It glowed the way a promise glows in a kept heart. She opened her eyes and watched the snow's mouth soften. "Now," she said, a word shaped like gratitude, "if you wish." From beneath the snow, the bell rang. Not outside, not into the air, as if the world needed telling, but inward, through loam and root and stone. The note touched every closed hand in the soil and asked it to choose its own opening. It reached the sleeping water at the meadow's lowest seam and taught it how to be due first, not rush. It touched the frost's inner latch and suggested release without collapse. It found the memory of last year's meadow and reminded it that memory and hope are sisters. The snow above the stone rose the width of a fingertip, then settled. A line appeared, a slow seam the length of a breath, then widened into an ellipse no larger than a saucer. The air that escaped through it was sweeter by an inch. Lumi removed her hands and let the seam decide itself. No urging, no urging, no urging. From the seam, a pale spear lifted, wet and sure, carrying a droplet of thaw on its head like a crown. The spear paused, then bent, then rose again, and the droplet fell soundlessly onto the stone and shone there like a blessing. Two white bells unbuttoned from green and hung their small faces near the light. The flower exhaled something that was not scent and was not sound, but both a message too simple to name. Here I am. Begin gently. A second snowdrop answered, a hand span away. A third. Then, with a patience that felt like song, a slow tide of white bells moved outward from the stone in a ring. Then another ring. Then a ring that intersected those rings the way ripples marry on a calm pond. The white did not blaze. It accumulated. Green followed, modest and competent, stitching the bells together with narrow leaves that wrote yes in leaning strokes. The fox rose and took 3 delicate steps closer, then sat again, resisting his own joy as one resists laughter in a chapel. The moth folded and unfolded, counting in a language only wings speak. Lumi felt the bell now a flower in the soil pulse once more, and with it, the remaining light in her hands dimmed of its own will. She looked down. What she held had become only warmth, and then only memory, and then only the feeling you keep after someone you love squeezes your fingers and lets go. Thank you, she whispered into her empty palms, which were not empty at all. From the cool beyond the meadow's edge, the old kindness of Thalin approached, not walking, not pressing, arriving the way clarity arrives. The air around Lumi corrected itself by 1 degree, and the snow smoothed its own face in welcome. He did not show himself at once. He allowed the meadow to be seen first. The bells spread white and green and white again, until the bowl looked lined with 1,000 small lamps whose light was not for seeing, but for remembering. The cottages, still tucked and breathing, received that remembering at their foundations. The beams felt it, the bricks, the bed frames, the kettle handles. The lake felt it along the inlet, where drip had become a syllable. The grove felt it in the moss, darker and grateful. The ridge felt it under nests that were learning the sky's language again. Only then did Thalin stand beside Lumi as a shape drawn from winter's careful breath. He looked at the stone, at the seam, at the bells that had become themselves without harm. You returned it, he said, the words so even they could have been laid down by a level, to where it first rang. It wanted to be home, Lumi answered. I wanted to help it arrive. Thalin did not nod. He did not need to. Agreement listened inside his silence. His gaze traveled the meadow slowly, as if reading a long letter written in white script. At last, he let his shoulders lower a fraction. The last cold's keeper had a way of smiling that could not be seen, but could be felt in the bones of things. The last cold belongs now to the mountain's shade, he said, low, where it will keep the streams clear and the snowpack patient until the high places are ready. Lumi let a breath she hadn't realized she was keeping leave her slowly. Thank you, she said to Thalin, to the bells, to the stone that remembered good beginnings. Thalin turned the still water of his eyes to her. You invited, he said. You did not insist. A pause, gentle as a hand on a coverlet. This valley will use your way. The moth drifted between them and drew a tiny circle in the air, sealing the sentence. The fox walked to the seam and set his nose to it without touching, reading whatever foxes read in fresh spring. He sneezed once, soft joy, and sat. Around the stone, the bells kept opening, not all at once, not in rows, but in a quiet mathematics that only meadows know. Far off, a robin joined its one bead of sound to the new white, then hid its beak again under wing. A curtain in a cottage moved, then didn't. The lake made the creak of an old house grateful to settle. The grove breathed the moss smell of rain that hasn't happened yet. Lumi lowered her hand to the snow and felt not cold but clarity. The bell she had carried no longer needed carrying. It lived where it belonged, and from that home, it would send its soft command in every direction. Waking is gentle. Begin without breaking. The message would travel through the earth to every hill, through the water to every leaf, through the air to every beak and wing. Rest, then rise, she said, repeating what the meadow was already doing. Rise, then rest again. Thalen inclined his head in farewell, not absence, but continued presence at a distance. His outline softened, the way frost softens when sunlight is only a thought. Before he was gone, his voice reached her one last time. A warmth pressed into cool. You have made a friend of late winter. The air held the meaning after the words were done. Lumi stood, and the meadow's curve carried her gently back toward the rim. Bells nodded behind her. Green wrote its bright yeses. Snow adjusted its quilt with unoffended grace. In her pocket, there was no lantern now, only a comfortable emptiness where warmth had lived and learned to belong elsewhere. She laid a mitten there anyway, and felt her own heartbeat answer with new steadiness. The fox trotted ahead, pausing at the path to let her catch up, as if he were opening a door. The moth settled on her shoulder, the world's smallest epaulet of moonlight. First light, Lumi said, looking over the valley from the rim lake. Grove, ridge, cottages, bells. First song. She did not ring anything. She did not hum. She let the place speak, drip from the inlet. A single robin vowel, the moss breath in the grove's shade, the air's soft in and out along the ridge. It was music without performer, a choir without instruction, a waking without alarm. And in the Heart Meadow below, the snowdrop's white heads counted the morning with their nods, blessing the year ahead, not with noise, but with presence, tiny bells that rang by being exactly what they were. First light arrived not as a trumpet, but as a hand offered. It touched the hills with a tenderness that knew all their winters and loved them for it. It moved over the cottages, as if laying quilts straighter, over the footbridge, as if smoothing a ribbon, over the lake's porcelain face, until the inlet's small syllables joined into a single quiet word. In the grove, moss drank a deeper green. Sap climbed like a careful reader turning pages. The letters of last autumn loosened into soil soft enough to dream forward. On the ridge, the air remembered how to carry wing beats without dropping them. And in the Heart Meadow, one bell became many, white heads nodding a slow yes to the day. Lumi stood at the rim and let the light find her last. The fox brushed her calf with the friendly weight of a greeting. The moth hovered by her cheek ash and moon wings opening, closing, opening two tiny doors, keeping the morning polite. Beneath Lumi's palm, her shawl pocket held only the memory of warmth, and even that wanted to belong to the meadow more than to her. She did not mind. Love is that way when it is doing its job. "Good morning," she said, the words quiet as steam from a first cup. The valley answered without hurry. At the lake, drip became murmuring thread. Between two birches, a spider's line woke to its own silver and drew a single bead of water to wear like jewelry. Far off, a kettle in a small kitchen agreed to boil slowly, so as not to startle, then sent its first small breath up the flue. Inside that house, two hands older, patient, folded a blanket back to the foot of a narrow bed and tucked the sheet with respect. A child slept on, richer by a softness she did not know to name. "Listen," Lumi whispered to the fox and moth, though they already were. "The song is beginning." It began everywhere at once, which is to say it began inside everything. Roots hummed the note of rising. Water took that note and lengthened it so it could bend around stones politely. Air lifted it and added a feather's brush so it would not scratch the sky. The bells in the meadow gave the smallest, clearest tone a silver thread no thicker than kindness, and the thread stitched itself through lake, grove, ridge, and roof beam alike. A robin, brave by nature and also by nurture, placed the first bead of sound on the thread. One round syllable, gold and sweet, not loud enough to claim anything, exactly the right size to share. A wren hurried up next with 3 careful buttons of song, each fastened where the morning needed holding. A thrush, remembering a lullaby it had practiced in sleep, added a long, honey-brown line. None of these were solos. The bells did not quiet to make room. The bells rang by being. The birds sang by joining. Lumi breathed with it all. In, and the hills brightened by a teaspoon. Out, and the frost let go of one more cuff and folded itself neatly into sparkle. In, and a fox invisible to other eyes stepped from a hedgerow with a mouse's breakfast in mind. Out, and he reconsidered, feeling his stomach answered by patience. There would be time. Everything good was arriving on feet that did not run. The moth drifted higher and traced a circle above Lumi's head, small as a halo that fits without deserving. The fox sat and lifted his muzzle to watch a brief parade of light pass on the lake, a few inches of brightness, riding the first ripple like a child on a slow pony. He gave one soft huff, which is fox gratitude, and kept still so as not to frighten the pony away. "Thank you," Lumi told the bells, "for letting us borrow your beginning." Down in the meadow, a snowdrop shook one last bead of dew from its rim. The bead fell onto the old stone's shoulder and rolled to a stop in a shallow dent made by 100 springs worth of kisses. Somewhere beneath that stone, the bell she had carried shaped its glow into root and stem and leaf and sent its message outward. Waking is gentle. Begin without breaking. On the ridge, nests rustled as feathers tidied themselves. No chicks cried, none needed. The sky breathed slow in, slow out, and the trees answered like friends who liked the same pace. In the grove, a beech's gray trunk took on the pale of pearl for 1 minute only, and then returned to its proper, dignified shade, pleased to have been briefly younger. Sap rose and paused, learning the bell's patience and making it flesh. The cottages received the day as if it were a letter addressed to the house itself, to beams and joists and hearthstones. Continue. To hinges and latches, be kind. To windows, soften the edges of everything you show. A door opened without squeak. Someone stepped out with a bucket. Someone else set a cup on a step and delayed the first sip to watch a bead of steam climb and vanish. The bead looked like thanks. Lumi went down the path the frost had written for her, though the frost itself was now mostly memory, preserving her steps like neat handwriting in margin snow. The fox walked at her left. The moth rode the bright seam above her shoulder, and the morning made room for all three. As they passed the grove, she laid her mitten on one beech and heard the slow, happy arithmetic of sap. Not numbers, exactly agreements. Here, then rest. The moss breathed a dark, good smell, as if it had just heard the funniest, gentlest joke and would be smiling about it all day. They came to the lake's near edge. The inlet, once a narrow throat holding its hush like a pearl, now sang a threadlong song that could not be hurried even by joy. It had decided on a key that suited everyone. Reeds could hum, fish could turn, the willow could whisper, and the ice farther out could keep dignity while considering retirement. A droplet traveled under the ice, found the lip, and let go plink. The sound was small and perfect, like a stitch pulled through cloth and smoothed flat with a thumb. Soon, Lumi told the larger water, which agreed by not arguing. At the footbridge, she paused. The rail, cool and honest, held the day without taking any for itself. Lumi placed one mitten on the wood and one on the air, and stood between them, a hinge that did not creak. "Thank you," she told the bridge, because bridges are happiest when thanked. The bridge did not move. It held. That is how bridges say you're welcome. Across the field, a pair of crows discussed the weather with the seriousness of librarians, then fell morally silent at the sight of the meadow's white bells. A blue coat opened a cottage door, and a small hand, pink with just waked warmth, pointed not a stabbing point, an offering one. The larger hand behind it bent lower, as if thoughts themselves had knees and knew when to kneel. Neither came farther. The bells belonged to their own moment and were left to it. Thalen's presence returned as a cool that had learned something about kindness it hadn't known it knew. He did not stand close, because he was a keeper of distances as well as of late winters. But the air smoothed near him the way ice smooths when the skate is removed and the pattern remains. Lumi did not turn. She did not have to. When one friend agrees with another, the whole world is their handshake. "It is good," he said, his voice leaf deep and water low. "It is itself," she answered, which is the better word for good when mornings are the subject. "Will you stay?" Lumi looked over the bells, the roofs, the ridge, the patient lake. She placed her hand on her chest and listened to her own breath counting with the valleys. "I'll visit at twilight each day," she said. "While the last cold learns the mountain's shade, I'll listen in the warm hours and keep the seams from tugging. When the first swallows return, I'll walk the air with them so they land where the quiet is strongest." Thalen's cool grew clearer for a moment, like glass polished to see through. "Twilight is a friend to both of us," he said. "We will meet there." The fox, having no opinion about twilight except that it smells excellent, wagged his tail once. The moth drew a soft figure 8 and tucked itself back under the corner of Lumi's shawl, a page mark in the book of the day. "Then it is decided," Lumi said, and decisions spoken gently have a way of already being true the moment they are said. She turned toward the Heart Meadow one last time, not to supervise, only to admire. White bells nodded, green stitched itself, earth breathed, snow loosened without disrespect, and the old stone kept its cool under a crown of damp light. A lark, not yet ambitious for noon, rose a little way, embroidered 2 bright loops on the sky, and went back to its stitch in the hedge. It had heard the thread, it had added its color, it had remembered to rest. "Rest," Lumi told the valley. "Then sing." The order mattered, and the valley liked orders that felt like kindness. They walked back slowly along the frost-not-frost path. At her shoulder, the moth's wings made the air measurable. At her calf, the fox's fur made the light look warmer where it touched. Lumi's hands stayed inside her mittens. Her pockets were empty, except for the comfort that work, done without rush, finishes itself in the hearts of other things. At the edge of the valley, where rock writes its tall sentences and pine edits them with green commas, Lumi paused. She looked over her shoulder at the place she had watched and asked and waited into morning. It looked back at her with the friendliness of a room that will always smell like tea. "First light," she said, and the bells answered by being white. "First song," she said, and the birds answered by choosing notes that didn't crowd. "First promise," she said, and the water answered by shining without showing off. "And the small bell," she finished, "that woke a whole valley by teaching it how to be gentle with itself." Her voice fell into the soft, right silence after a story has ended and not one person wants to move yet. She took a final breath with the place inhale, and the hills breathed in, exhale, and the chimneys made their tiniest clouds, and then she turned toward the path that would bring her to twilight by another way. The fox trotted at her side. The moth rode a quiet current just ahead. Behind them, the valley kept doing what beginnings do best when no one rushes them. It kept beginning. Bells nodded, water practiced, roots wrote, wings memorized blue, and every time the sun looked their way, it moved with the kind of patience that makes even the oldest stone feel a little younger. Sleep now, if you wish. The valley will keep singing at the exact volume your dreams prefer. And when you wake, you will find that the smallest bell somewhere under snow, somewhere inside, you still knows how to ring without ringing at all.